Hey, would you do me a favor? Grab your phone or smart device and open up that camera. Then point it right here at the QR code. Do you have it? I'll wait a second. When you see the link pop up on your screen, give it a tap. You ready? Boom! Welcome to the Hillsborough County official YouTube channel. We've got all sorts of videos here, all about what makes our community such an awesome place. From local events and community highlights to what's in the perfect Cuban sandwich. We've got it all. We're always adding new things, so while you're here, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss a new video. Here's that QR code again, just in case you missed it. Go ahead and check it out. Ooh. This must have fallen out of that video. This really is the perfect Cuban sandwich.
Morning and welcome to the Transportation Planning Organization meeting for Wednesday, December the 13th. Let us stand and pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we have the roll call, Jessica Vaughn will be joining us late in the meeting. Gail, could you give us a roll call, please?
Commissioner Myers?
Here.
Mayor Ross?
Here.
Commissioner Owen?
Here.
Commissioner Wastel?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner Kemp? Here. Councilmember Clendenin?
Here.
Councilmember Hurtak?
Here.
Councilmember Maniscalco has been excused. Mayor Kilton?
Here.
Charles Klug?
Here.
Gina Dew? Bob Fry?
Here.
Scott Drainville?
Here.
Planning Commissioner Joseph?
Here.
We do have an in-person quorum.
Thank you. Now can we have the approval of the minutes?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposers? That motion is carried. We have one speaker for public comment this morning. Good morning, Rick Fernandez.
Hello, Chair. Hello, Board. Happy holidays to all. I'm deferring public comment, but I do have my CAC Chair report to give.
Okay, just bear with us. Okay, well, we're going to move right into the report, so you can go ahead and give your report at this time.
Okay, that was very burdensome. I appreciate it. For the record, my name's Rick Fernandez. I'm your CAC Chair. Relatively short report today. Your CAC met on December the 6th, last Wednesday. We were presented with 3 action items, no status reports. First action item is also on the board agenda for approval, and that was the 2050 plan needs assessment for real choices when not driving. By a vote of 11-0, the CAC approved the 2050 plan needs assessment. By way of comments during the discussion, members were interested in whether commuter rail was included as the assessment, and staff explained that fixed guideway transit falls into the major projects and will be included in that assessment which will come before the committee and board in early 2024. Clarification was asked about the trend spending level for buses when heart service has been decreasing. Question raised, what would happen if a portion of the CIT were used for operating costs? There was also interest in including communities of concern as a measure when prioritizing regional trail projects. A future topic for a CAC meeting will be sharing data and research on trail utilization, economic benefits, and the alternative to driving that they offer. The second action item also on the board agenda for today was the 2050 Plan Needs Assessment for Good Repair and Resilience. By a vote of 8-3, the CAC approved this item, submitting for your review with our recommendation. The discussion here, as summarized in the written report that's part of your package, there was interest in knowing whether the long-term maintenance projections include the shift to electric buses, with staff explaining that the lower maintenance cost for electric buses was documented in the electric vehicle infrastructure plan. Members were supportive of the attention to critical roads and are vulnerable to storm surge. There was concern raised about what inflation rate for road maintenance was used, since the amount noted to achieve greater performance was vastly higher than shown in the 2045 LRTP. There was a request to bring back to the committee a comparison between the 2050 needs assessment and the 2045 needs assessment, again with relation to the inflation rate. The final action item presented to the CAC was our meeting calendar, which with a couple of tweaks was approved, and we will continue on what is generally our standard meeting schedule on Wednesday evenings, first Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m., with a couple of changes, as I suggested earlier, not necessary for further comment now. And we look forward to continuing to work with you next year. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to field them. Otherwise, happy holidays to all of you, and thank you for your time.
Have any questions? Okay, thank you, Rick. Next staff is Harmony McGee. Good morning.
Good morning, Harmony TPO staff. Summarizing input regarding today's board action items, the Livable Roadways Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory and the Technical Advisory Committee all approved the 2050 Plan Needs Assessment for real choices when not driving. During the Livable Roadways Committee meeting, there was discussion about the frequency of HART buses, interest in identifying the responsible agency for each of the trails, and ways to build trails for less than the estimated unit cost per mile. Members were pleased that paratransit was included in the assessment. Comments were also made by the Technical Advisory Committee, noting that the BOCC has not officially adopted the Greenways Master Plan used in the assessment to identify potential trail locations. It was clarified that the needs assessment is looking high level and does not include a list of specific trails to be funded by 2050, just the miles of trail needed to reach a specified performance level. The Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board received this item as a status report in August, but did not take action. However, a suggestion was made to extend community outreach for additional input. It was explained that a variety of stakeholders weighed in on the analysis and that the public will soon be asked to rank the various programs and if they support additional funding sources. Concerning the 2050 Plan Needs Assessment for the State of Good Repair and Resilience, the Technical Advisory Committee received the presentation, but they were unable to take action due to loss of quorum, but no concerns were raised. As you have also heard, the CAC moved to approve this needs assessment. Comments were also received on social media, primarily through the TPO Facebook page. Dave Coleman inquired about the TMA and the SCTPA meetings, asking if it was important for citizens to participate. Staff responded by explaining the difference between the two groups and how it'd be valuable to participate. He also commented on the TPO's Vision Zero Street study for Sly and Waters Avenue. He suggested that funding be allocated to restripe those roadways and have the speed limits lowered. We also received feedback from Mike Kramer, who shared that he would like to see the county consider adding another half-cent to the community investment tax. TBO staff responded to his comment by providing the link to our current 2050 LRTP page and encouraging him to participate in the upcoming LRTP public opinion survey. This concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Before we approve the consent agenda, Johnny would like to speak to a change in the calendar.
As Harmony reported to you, there was one request by the CAC to move its January meeting date from the 3rd to the 8th. We just learned of this at the end of the CAC's meeting, and so that request wasn't communicated to you all in the agenda packet. And then secondly, in light of this board's discussion about the role of the policy committee and the topics pertaining to the regional merger, we decided not to host any policy committee meetings in 2024 and instead to have the full board meet and host 4 special meetings, one in February, April, September, and December. Those special meetings, again, will be dedicated to discussing merger topics and long-range planning topics, as well as establishing policy positions for the TMA reps to communicate back to that regional body. Just to be clear, those special meetings will be in addition to the regularly scheduled monthly TPO board meetings.
Okay. Do we have any questions? We have a motion to approve the consent with the correction to a change for the January meeting. We have a second. Okay. It's been moved in second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposes? That motion is carried. Thank you so much. We'll move right into our action items. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning, board members. I feel so far away from you guys when I'm back here. I'm going to have us, we'll do 3 votes this morning. First is election of chair, then vice chair, and then finally we'll have a quick discussion about committee appointments and then a final vote at the end just to confirm the board's appointments to those committees. The way we'll do the chair nominations and vice chair is I'll ask for nominees. I'll keep asking until I don't get any more, and then we'll vote on the nominees. If there's only one nominee, that person becomes chair or vice chair. So first, I would ask for nominees for TPO chair.
Yes. First, I want to say, Commissioner Myers, you've done an outstanding job as chair. I think Mayor Ross has done an outstanding job as vice chair. I think there's kind of a natural progression. I think that Mayor Ross has been a real steady hand for this board, and I'd like to nominate Mayor Ross for chair.
Okay, Mayor Ross is nominated. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Myers for 1 more year. I believe the chair is term limited to 2 years.
That's correct. So Commissioner Myers is nominated, or any other nominations? Okay. What I think the cleanest way to do this, I've asked the clerk what she'll do a roll call, and each voting member just say the name of the person you're voting for. That way we can do it in 1 vote rather than 2. So I'd ask the clerk to go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Myers?
Commissioner Myers.
Mayor Ross? Ross. Commissioner Owen?
Ross.
Commissioner Wastel?
Ross.
Commissioner Cohen?
Myers.
Commissioner Kemp? Councilmember Clendenin? Councilmember Hurtak? Mayor Kilton? Charles Klug? Gina Dew? Bob Frey? Scott Drainville? Planning Commissioner Joseph? Bear with me while I total. I have Commissioner Myers with 9 and Mayor Ross with 5.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I look forward to serving for another year. And to you, Mayor Ross.
Okay, next is nominations for TPO vice chair. Do I have any nominations?
I'll nominate Mayor Ross.
Mayor Ross is nominated. Or any other nominations? All right, seeing no other nominations, Mayor Ross is elected Vice Chair. Congratulations. And then finally, to go to the committee appointments, we have first, well, let's do that one last because I think it's going to be more interest. Let's start with the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board Chair. Presently, Commissioner Myers is in that position. I guess I would start by asking Commissioner Myers, are you interested in remaining in that position?
Yes.
Okay. Next, regarding the Livable Roadways Committee, I have Councilwoman Hurtak as chair. Are you interested in remaining in that position?
Yes.
And then finally, I have Director Anderson or Mr. Klug serving as the alternate for the MPO Advisory Council. Or is the port okay remaining in that position? Okay. And so the final one is the TMA Leadership Group. Presently, we have Commissioner Kemp, Councilmember Hurtak, and Mayor Ross. The alternates are Director Lopano and Director Slater. Does anyone wish to make any changes to that group? Okay. Seeing no other direction on these, I just would ask for a final vote. So essentially what you're voting is just to reappoint last year's appointments. And we could just do, honestly, Commissioner Myers, unless there's a need for a roll call vote, you could just do a standard call vote. All in favor?
All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposes? That motion is carried. Okay. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
Okay. Followed by next, Elizabeth Watkins and Sarah Gooseby. Come up in that order, please. Good morning.
Good morning, TPO Board. Elizabeth Watkins, TPO staff. I just wanted to introduce to you today the 2050 Real Choices When Not Driving Needs Assessment. The purpose of this analysis is to inform the long-range transportation plan and illustrate the current needs and performance of local bus service, transportation disadvantage service, and trails and side paths. So we have Sarah Goolsby from Benesh, who is our consultant, and she'll detail the analysis. Cheryl, if you'd pull up the slides.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Goolsby with Benesh. Next slide. Thank you. So as Elizabeth said, the purpose of this needs assessment was to look at expanding mobility options for 3 modes of other transportation, including bus service, so service operated by HART, the transportation disadvantage services operated by Sunshine Line, and then also the trails and side paths. This was a systems level, high-level analysis to identify potential projects to invest in under 2 investment scenarios. One scenario was the trend investment level, which is a financially constrained scenario. And then there was the unconstrained vision scenario that just demonstrates what we could do if additional funding is invested in these other transportation modes. And then we also looked at the benefits and costs of each of these scenarios. Next slide. So the first one I'll talk about is the bus service needs assessment. We worked closely with HART on this needs assessment. We used the recent transit development plan as a starting point. And their TDP identified a list of transit needs and then also developed a financial and implementation plans over a 10-year period. And so the trend investment level follows this TDP financial plan. It's financially constrained. It's assumed that the existing funding level is carried on throughout through 2050 through the LRTP horizon period. And then the unconstrained vision shows, it assumes that all of the transit needs identified in the transit development plan are going to be implemented over the LRTP horizon. And so we looked at a few different performance measures for these scenarios. The first one was transit levels of service and identifying the level of service on roadway segments within the county. And so you can see in the graphic on the right, frequent service means there is a a bus comes every 15 minutes or less. Somewhat frequent service, there's a bus coming every 15 to 30 minutes, and then anything over 30 minutes is considered to have minimal or no transit service. We also looked at the population and jobs served within the quarter-mile service area of the fixed routes. And then we also took a quick look at estimating economic benefits of these scenarios using the American Public Transportation Association's 2020 study that stated that for every dollar invested in public transportation generates $5 in economic return. Next slide. So currently, HART's existing routes, about 2/3 of them run on 60-minute headways. And so the other routes that run 15 to 30 minutes are located primarily in the urban core. And right now, about 33% of population and jobs have access to frequent service, 29% have access to somewhat frequent service, and 38% have minimal or no access to transit. And then the 2023 budget for the operating and capital costs for HART was $160 million. Next slide. So under the trend investment level, this one is financially constrained, and you can see that no new services are assumed under this investment level, only frequency improvements on certain existing routes. And so you can see under the benefits that the access to frequent service has increased a little bit, around 7% up to 40%. And then we estimated an economic impact of $28 billion over the LRTP horizon period, and then estimated a total cost of $5.6 billion. Next slide. So under the unconstrained vision, in addition to higher frequency on more routes, there are 14 new local and express routes identified, and also 4 on-demand circulators. And so this would extend our regional service over to Lakeland, to Clearwater, up to the Lutz area in Pasco County, and then would also provide additional services to other areas of the county outside of the urban core, like South County, Plant City, and then Citrus Park area over to the west. And then under this investment level, you'll see now that about 70% of population and jobs would have access to frequent service and somewhat frequent service, and we estimated an economic impact of $44.5 billion over the LRTP horizon, and then estimated a cost of $8.9 billion. Next slide. And so moving on to the transportation disadvantage needs assessment, this is essentially the inverse of the bus service results. So the TD services are provided by Sunshine Line to mostly our older adults or persons with disabilities who live outside of HART service areas. So that means they do not live within the fixed route service area, and they do not live within the 3/4 mile ADA complementary service area. And so you'll see in the table below the trend status quo investment level actually has a total need of $573 million, which is about $113 million higher than what we found in the vision scenario of $460 million. Next slide. And then finally, the trail and side path needs assessment. So the projects included in this needs assessment only include protected facilities. They do not include unprotected bike lanes or unpaved trails. And so existing today is 205 miles of trails and side paths, as you'll see in the map on the right. Next slide. And so we wanted to highlight a couple of differences in the methodology that we used for this needs assessment compared to the assessment for the 2045 LRTP. In the 2045 needs assessment, we identified 53 projects and added 149 miles of trails. But since then, the county and other partners have begun updating the Greenways Master Plan, and in coordinating with them for this effort, we identified 130 projects and added 408 miles of trails. And so at full build out, that would mean the trail network would be over 600 miles, and then it would provide three times the access to people within a quarter mile of a trail. Next slide. And then another difference in the methodology was the costs used to estimate total need. In the 2045 LRTP, we used a $945,000 per mile estimate for construction costs only, which gave us a $142 million total need. But for this assessment, we used a $3 million per mile planning level estimate that includes not only the construction costs, but the costs for planning, design, land acquisition, structures, crossing, et cetera. And so this gives us a total need of $1.2 billion. Next slide. And so since this is a pretty significant increase since the last time, we also identified two additional delivery approaches. The first one is to focus on the regional priority corridors, which includes Upper Tampa Bay Trail, Tampa Bypass Canal, and the Florida Gulf Coast Trail. And then the second approach includes trails that go through the communities of concern, so putting the focus on equity. Next slide. And so you'll see in the first row of this table, if we were to deliver the full planned trail and side path network over the 2050 LRTP horizon, it would be $49 million per year. But if we focused on the priority corridors only, that would come to about $6.5 million per year. And then if just focusing on communities of concern and those trails, it would come to almost $13 million per year. Next slide. And so with that, today we are asking for you all to approve the draft 2050 needs plan assessment for real choices when not driving, but we'll also take any questions.
Any question, board members? Yes, Josh. Commissioner?
Who are we communicating this? It seems kind of made up, $1.2 billion number. I mean, we jumped from 115 to 1.2 billion. It seems kind of, we're just creating the equation. Does that make sense? What we did 5 years ago, we're changing the variables, which changed the equation. So now we've 10x'd the number over a 5-year period. It seems empty. So who is this number going to be communicated to?
Thank you for your question, Commissioner. I think that the updated methodology is a better reflection of what the actual costs are to deliver a trail. And so in some ways, this is intended to moderate expectations. What we hear from the public oftentimes is that trails are so cheap to deliver, cost per mile, why not invest all the money that we have in them? whereas the real costs of delivering a trail include a lot of things that we had previously not considered, namely right-of-way acquisition, which sometimes can be the most expensive part of delivering those types of projects. And so although we did add miles of trail that are proposed to be built over the next 20 years, we wanted to attach a more realistic cost estimate to those trail miles.
So I see what you're doing. There's a danger in it. My entire campaign, I heard 3 individuals just continue to make up fake, like we have this many billions of needs, no, we have this many. I mean, they were all saying different billion-dollar figures, but to the general public. So everyone's confused and thinking, okay, we have 13 billion, no, 16 billion. Oh, no, now it's $18 billion of needs. It seems to be like this constant moving target. So when we introduce something like this, it creates more of that type of really hyperbolic communication to folks this is the type of information that absolutely will be weaponized to try and convince people to tax themselves more. So we're changing the equation because we say that we believe that it's been misrepresented to try and deter folks from just believing we can write a small check and build all the trails is because they don't understand all of the other hidden costs. Is that the end game?
Well, that's certainly part of it, to temper the expectations of the public and give them more realistic, expectations of what it costs to deliver trails, certainly. The good news is that although we feel confident in the methodology, that it better reflects true cost, this board will be the body that decides what number of trails make it into the ultimate long-range plan. And so there's no guarantee that all 400 miles of trails that we have documented today are the temperature of the board. You may choose to decide that only 100 of them are cost feasible, or maybe even less than that. Really what we're looking to do is set an upper limit and have the public tell us, are you confident or are you comfortable with the number of trail investments we've been making? Here's an option, like a straw man scenario. Do you want to invest that $1 billion to deliver 400 miles, or is it some number in between? And so what this really represents is the extreme opposite of the baseline scenario.
Okay, and that number, I understood her to say that it didn't represent anything other than how many miles you expected to deliver based off of a flat cost per mile.
Sure. I might call up Lucas. He might be able to articulate the methodology a little better than I can.
And that reflected for paved trails, which I understand doesn't necessarily need to be the case. I know that, and this is separate from the Greenways Committee and their plan. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. This Lucas Cruz with Patel Green and Associates. This analysis only looked at planned paved trails, and so this analysis did not identify any new trails. What we did was assemble the existing plans from the local agencies that had their own public involvement processes, such as the Hillsborough Greenways Master Plan. And one of the biggest increases was that new Hillsborough Greenways Master Plan over doubled the number of trails that was identified through that public involvement process. And so the cost estimates that were done in 2045, we've seen a lot of inflation in construction costs in the last 5 years, as many of you probably know. So what we started from was the Hillsborough Greenways Master Plan gave a construction cost range of $1.4 to $2.2 million per mile. That was just to construct a trail, and that's what the numbers you would use to start a design. When you would scope an individual area, you would say we're starting at this point, and then you would add in overpasses and design and right-of-way. And so for this effort to try to get a sense of aggregate cost over if we built the entire network, we added those other variables estimated to get that $3 million per mile cost.
it just seems like we're presenting an unachievable goal instead of an actual plan of how we can get people more trails. But all right, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. Commissioner. Councilman Clendenden?
Yeah, I would just like, excuse me, I would just like clarification of the consequences or what the real action is. So on this board approval of this study, is this just accepting the study as is and then just use it as a baseline for future decisions by the board on prioritization?
Yes, Councilman, that's correct. And so with this information, we'll be using it to plug into our public engagement survey that's going to be launching in January. Again, this information will provide two extremes. On the one end, we're going to be asking the public if they would like to maintain the existing level of funding and trails, letting them know what kind of performance that buys you. If they opt to have the platinum package of trails, full build out, designed great with separation, here's what that would cost as well. The hybrid scenario that we'll be working toward will probably be some performance level in the middle. I don't think that we're going to get a ton of responses from folks saying that they're happy with either the existing or the platinum level of investment. And then we'll bring that information to you all when we're building out the cost feasible scenarios to decide what moves into the long range plan. I hope that's clear, but I can expound if you'd like.
I mean, I guess it is. It's just I just wanted to say this has nothing to do with prioritization. It has nothing. It's just accepting the report as is, as factual information about what the actual cost, if we were to pursue these agendas, this is what the actual cost would be.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of the format that all of the needs assessments will take. Again, the public has never told us that they desire top of the line performance for any of the needs assessments. In almost every example, every time we've gone out to the public and conducted a survey, they've told us that they wanted some number in between the two extremes. And then our job is to tell them how much that would cost and how we can deliver revenue to fund those if the public wants to move forward with those improvements.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, it's Councilwoman Hurtak. Okay.
Thank you. And I saw this at the Livable Roadways Committee too, and I understand the current level versus the platinum level, but I do think that even for us, it's very complicated. I have a harder time with just having two extremes because, of course, people want what's in the middle, but they don't know what they want. I think by and large, other than a trail next to, like, say, their house, I think that having, and I know this might cost more or be more, but just maybe some stop gaps along the way. What would it be if we included or, connected some trails that people really want connected? Like, what would that cost be? Kind of something more visual for folks. I know we're trying, in the platinum, you're looking at doing it all, but right now it's similar to a lot of roadway things where we're just trying to, what would it take to just finish connecting that? Finish connecting a highly used trail, or if there's a large amount, if there's 20 miles to connect X trail and Y trail, maybe that's something that people are interested in. But really, I would love to see something in the middle for something like that includes connecting our highest used or finishing off to complete a cycle, as it were. Just for me, it would be better visualization, and I think it would be better for the public as well to give us a true estimate of what those types of costs might be in the future. And I appreciate both, but I need something in the middle that's a little more viable for me, because as we approve these projects, it's nice to know what we could get if we had all the money in the world, but I want something a little more realistic. So,
thank you, Commissioner Kemp.
I thought that was an excellent observation. It's just so difficult for the public to understand, and also it's overwhelming even, I think, for us having some embedding in this, but I know this is a traditional way. Just some feedback about that. I'm just a little curious again about the transit. So the trails are all in Hillsborough County, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But you included regional transit connections, correct? And you priced them.
Right, but there are some regional connections in there, but they would be operated by HART.
Right. So, but here's the other thing. So, but when we price them, also it just confuses me, and I'm sure I just don't even know where to begin with it. But capital versus operations for that, and does Hillsborough County pay for all that? Because you had a price tag up there. So if we're connecting to other places and serving them, for instance, Wesley Chapel, and mostly that's people from Pasco County wanting to come to Hillsborough County, and to me that should be a service that is something that Pasco County, I can imagine us running it, but that Pasco County has costs involved in it. Was that ever, how is that done? Do you have a model for that?
Not currently. So the cost for that was just based off of Hart's assumptions. Right now I can't speak to whether they considered anything coming from Pasco County or other counties for their regional services.
Well, you did mention like Lakeland, I think, and you mentioned Lutz, and part of Lutz is in Pasco County, and we had that before, and the reason I keep focusing on this, I'll just say, is because we are so underserved already in Hillsborough County. And even when I saw that map for 2050, it just, and I know you said about serving other communities in Hillsborough and more frequency, but the map, just a glance at it, just didn't seem very robust in terms of even serving Hillsborough County, which is a big region in itself. So I'll just say that for what it's worth, because I think it would also, and just as Councilmember Hurtak said, to break down bus routes, I've talked about this a lot. For instance, when you have something, and no one understands this, but or it's very little talked about, but one, which is our biggest bus route down Florida Avenue. It costs, on operations, we have the capital, but it costs about, from what I understand, about $450 per person for that. When we go out to the areas more, further from the downtown, where people, or where the routes are longer express routes, it's about $30 per a trip. And I think just some information for the public about that, a more specific breakdown so they understood that. I know we don't even get that information really so much at heart, but I've asked for so long, because I think that might help people also understand a little bit more about transit service and costs and, maybe density of transit services, things like that. It seems to me it should have a bearing, just as you said, the most used places where you get the most benefit and the most return on your investment in terms of helping people. So, and bringing better transit service. So I'll just say that. And then I have one more question. Was the ferry ever put in there or considered in terms of the transit?
That was not part of this needs assessment. I believe it might be considered as part of the major initiatives. The next needs assessment that will also contain the fixed guideway transit and BRT.
And when is that?
Next year, I believe.
Oh, okay. Because since it's like already out there operating, it seems like it would be a good thing to at least get some ideas about that. But thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Fry.
Yes, I was curious about the analysis where we noticed we showed the two different scenarios. Was mobility versus recreational taken into consideration on how much it would cost to provide mobility trails as opposed to just about providing recreational type trails?
Lucas?
If we could go back to the slide that shows the two funding scenarios, that'll help answer that question. One of the things that we did look at was that there is a large price tag to complete all 408 miles within the 25-year horizon. So we said, what if, just to see what the investment level would be to invest in those 3 regional priority trails or the communities of concern. If we go to the slide that shows the 2 scenarios. Keep going. It's in trails. One more, I believe. 2 more. Or yeah, if we go back right there. So those are the 2 scenarios. That would be those in between. So there's the current funding level. The number we were provided was $900,000 per year. And then if you built everything, it would be that $14 million per year. And so we said, what are those 2 in-between options? And this one would be, what if you built just those regional trails, the Tampa Bypass Canal Trail, the Florida Gulf Coast Trail, and then the Upper Tampa Bay Trail? What if you just built those? And then the other would be just within those communities of concern. So that would be essentially a recreational mobility breakdown. And then if you go to the next slide, please, you can see what the investment level would be for each of those scenarios.
So the communities of concern is a mobility analysis for the whole area?
A proxy for mobility. What if you focused your investment in those areas that have things like lowest car ownership and so forth?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, are we ready to make a motion to approve the draft? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposes? That motion is carried. Thank you so much. Okay, and then we have Connor and Pedro Cedros to come up, please. Good morning.
Good morning, Connor McDonald, TPO staff. I'm just going to introduce the needs assessment for state of good repair and also the presenter who's virtual. The needs assessment for state of good repair and resilience establishes the current and future needs of the transportation system, focusing on pavement, bridge, and transit assets while considering the resilience of these assets against potential challenges. Here to present is Dr. Pedro Cedros with Cambridge Systematics. Dr. Cedros is an infrastructure management specialist using his expertise in statistical analysis and modeling asset performance and traffic data to support transportation asset management and system performance improvement. With that, I'll leave it to Dr. Cedros.
Thank you, Connor. Can you hear me good?
morning.
Good morning. All right, so today I'll be presenting the work and results from the development of the 2050 LRTP.
Excuse me, could you speak a little louder, please?
Yeah,
Thank you so
sorry.
much.
What about now? Is this better?
Staff, can we increase the volume?
What about now? Is this better?
Yes, I think so, yes.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, just in case that wasn't clear. So today I'll be presenting the 2050, the work and results from the 2050 LRTP needs assessment for state of good repair and resilience. Next, please. So in today's slides, I'll first start with a description of the objectives of the needs assessment, then I'll discuss the data and assumptions from this analysis. Next, I'll discuss the results by asset type, starting with payment asset needs, then bridges, transit, and finally resilience investment needs. Next, I'll discuss the main conclusion from a needs assessment, and at the end, I'll open for any questions you may have. Next. So for this study, the objective was to perform a state of good repair and resilience investment analysis as part of the 2050 LRTP update. This included the analysis of current and future needs to achieve the state of good repair of payment bridges and transit assets, and the assessment of investment needs to increase the resiliency of assets to natural disasters and extreme weather in the Hillsborough region. Next. So the first step consisted of gathering the data for a needs assessment analysis. For this, we requested data on payment, bridge, and transit assets for each agency stakeholder, including condition, maintenance, cost, and budget information. When data was not available, we filled the gaps with assumptions informed by official documents and external sources. Examples of that are the budget from the 2050 RTP baseline spending compiled by the TPO, the asset management plans from Florida DOT and HARTS, and we also use inventory data for the bridges in the regions from the Federal Highway Info Bridge websites. For each of these, we also had one-to-one meetings with representatives from each agency where we discussed the data requests, but also afterwards we had other meetings to validate each assumption, each cost element from the data. Next. All right, so in the next couple of slides, I'll be showing the results from the needs assessment by asset type. For each of these analyses, we consider two spending levels, the trend spending level and the performance spending level. For the trend spending level, we assess the impact to the condition of the assets, assuming that the existing spending level continues to 2050, whereas for the performance spending, we calculated what is the additional funding to meet the state of good repair for that asset. So for the case of payment, the current spending is 136.2 million. So sustaining that spending level will result in only about 28% of the roads achieving the goals to be resurfaced once every 12 to 20 years, depending on the agency target for that. And we also noticed that the funding shortfall varies significantly across stakeholders. Then for the performance spending, we estimated an additional 86.9 million per year to meet the target resurfacing cycles to reach state of good repair. Under that additional funding, the typical roads will be resurfaced once every 18 years in the region. Next one. So for bridges, we found that the current spending is 19 million annually for bridge preservation. This funding results in about 72% of the bridges achieving a goal of rehabilitation every 4 years. It's a target that we discussed with the agencies. And again, the funding shortfall varies significantly across stakeholders. For the performance spending level, we calculated that the additional funding for the agencies to all reach the state of good repair for bridges is 7.4 million per year. Next one. All right, so for the transit needs assessment, we focus on the two most important or most expensive assets to maintain, which are buses and buildings. So something important to notice here is that HART has been operating in a scaled back service compared to the 2019 needs assessment. The bus fleet size is 32% smaller compared to the 2019, and that also decreased the needs compared to the previous needs assessment. For the trend spending level, we found that there are 12 million annually allocated for bus maintenance and replacement. Under that spending level, the current fleet of 132 buses can be replaced to reach ages less than 10 years, which is the Federal Transit Administration recommended benchmark. We also found that the administration and the heavy maintenance buildings are overdue for replacement. So in terms of the performance spending level, our conclusions were that the trend fleet spending level must be sustained to meet the FDA recommended benchmark, and there are over 105 million of backlogs currently in transit buildings maintenance. Next one. All right, so the last of the analysis that we conducted was the resilience investment needs. So we used data from the Resilient Tampa Bay study conducted in 2020. Under that study, there were 71 miles of critical roads, critical for the mobility in the region, that were identified as moderately to highly vulnerable to extreme weather. And we focus on two types of resilience improvement, which is the stormwater improvement and road resilience improvements, including hardening of pavement and subbase, raising profile of roads, shoreline preservation. So for these two, the trend spending level, so the current spending level is for stormwater, 1.6 million per year, and for road maintenance, the total budget is 82.3 million per year, and that's not considering the resilience improvements, right? So if these 71 critical miles of critical roads were to be treated for resilience improvements, the funding needed for stormwater resilience improvements is 14.8 million annually for the next 20 years, and then for road resilience improvements will be 67.4 million. Next slide, please. So the main conclusions from our needs assessment are: for pavement and bridges, the overall current spending levels is insufficient to maintain these assets at the target preservation cycles, and an additional 94 million per year would be needed to achieve their target preservation cycles in order to reach state of good repair. For transit assets, we found that there are over 105 million of backlogs in transit building maintenance, including HART's heavy maintenance facility, which is critical for the operations, which is already past the end of its useful life and it's in marginal condition. We also found that the current spending is sufficient to maintain the current bus fleet at the age recommended by FTA. Now, it should be noted that HART has been operating at a scaled-back service compared to 2019, with bus fleet size 32% smaller, and therefore additional analysis will be needed if the fleet increases. Lastly, for resilience investment needs, we found that the current spending on stormwater improvements only accounts for 11% of what's needed to improve the stormwater drainage on the critical roads that are moderately to highly vulnerable, and that the funding needed to harden these critical roads that are moderately to highly vulnerable to extreme weather is about 82% of the entire current road maintenance budget. Next one, please. All right, so the recommended action is to approve the 2050 Long-Range Transportation Plan Needs Assessment for State of Good Repair and Resilience. And now I will be happy to respond to any question you might have. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, board members? Mayor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a comment that kind of, I won't belabor it because we kind of had this discussion during the last presentation, but I think when we receive these reports, many of us, for a variety of reasons, look at one or more parts of them and go, I don't know, I'm not real comfortable, because we're laying out, we're making a bold statement here that, and to Commissioner Wastel's point, and really some of the others that all kind of dovetailed, if you put all these studies together that we approve and add up this stuff, you could easily go out in the community and say we have, $3 gazillion worth of unfunded transportation needs, when in fact we maybe don't. I mean, I think we all agree we need more money, but I don't think it's all of these present these scenarios, and there's a million questions in every one of these. Are you, and I don't need the answer specifically, but I mean, the questions that come up, are you adjusting these when you say current funding levels if we maintain that? Well, are you adjusting that figure for CPI and inflation and all that, or are you just flatlining that number? And, so there's a lot of questions here. I would, and one of the things that concerns me is we vote to approve these because I'm not sure what else we would do. And then a year from now, when we're having a workshop about the LRTP, and say, well, the TPO board approved this study and this study and this, so we approved these assumptions when in fact maybe some of us had some reservations about some of these assumptions, but what are we going to do? So we're being asked to approve these plans, and it just seems to me like, I mean, this is at our city, which of course is not a model for you, but we don't approve these, we accept them. and the board votes to accept these, which doesn't imply the same level of approval. Because I know just in my few years on this board, in the past, we've been hit with, oh, well, the board approved this last year. And I'm like, I don't remember approving that. And I go back and look at the discussion that we had, and I'm not sure everybody else intended to really approve that either, but that seems to be what we approved. And then it's used as a baseline for another thing moving forward. And so just a comment, I'd feel more comfortable if we were accepting these. I mean, we paid for them. I don't know how we cannot accept them. But approving them implies that we approve them, and I'm not sure that we're really all there.
Thank you. Councilman Clendenin.
I think you just perfectly captured my reservations on the last approval, because that was exactly what I was thinking. That's why I asked that clarifying question about what that vote meant. I think accepting would have been a much more appropriate vote on that as well, because I think a lot of this is woefully lacking in very specifics about projects. There's very broad information and doesn't necessarily capture specifics for us to be able to approve something or not approve something. So I think what Mayor Ross just identified is exactly what my concerns on these votes are as well. So I would prefer to accept these reports rather than approve them, because I don't want a year from now to come back and say, well, why did you vote for, if somebody would challenge it, if I was going to challenge a specific issue, to have that thrown back up at me is why did I vote that way on this issue?
Thank you. Mayor
just as an anecdote in Plant City, something that we're very proud of is that we have a portion of our ad valorem that's dedicated specifically to road maintenance and resurfacing. We started that about 5 years ago. We went from a maintenance timeline of about every 60 years to now we're on track to every 15 to 20 years. And so we're doing that locally. But we see just in that 5-year time frame significant bid spreads, money going further than we thought sometimes, not going as far, and that's just in a 5-year timeline. So we're talking about a 2050 plan. Of course, this is going to be way off because we're making assumptions 20 plus years out. So I think anybody that looks at this, that's paying any attention would know that these things are going to change every time that we look at them. It changes year to year, let alone on a timeline this long.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp?
Yeah, and to put, and both of you all three of you kind of put this out there, but there is one place where where your initial statement kind of doesn't apply, and that is asset preservation, the repaving, repair of everything we've already got. And if I know at Hillsborough County, the sidewalks, fixing just the sidewalks that are in disrepair, that the maintenance is already so overwhelming that it breaks the bank. So all the stuff about $1 billion or $3 billion, I mean, if you just look at us maintaining what we have, which makes me wonder, can we keep going? Because if we just look at the maintenance we have, it is far, far, far more than the assets. And then also I was told over and over again, initially for the first, I think, 4 or 5 years, every road is repaved every 17 years. I honestly thought that was true when I was told that. And I went to roads that have been, citizens have called residents and said, look at my road, and I've lived here for 23 years and no one's ever done anything, and it's just been a wreck. I mean, it's horrible, and there's not even an urgency about necessarily the repair because there's no, it may not be that many people that use it, and it may be expensive to repair, and so there's we'll fix a few potholes here and there because we don't have the resources. But we all know the asset preservation is a very different animal to me than all the other projects that we have out there that are new. And I bring up transit too. Transit is different. This is the thing that's not alike, because 70% of transit is operations. It's more like a fire station, a school, a park. You have these, operations that are when you do any of those things that are also included. So unlike these others that are either building it or repairing it or, preserving it, a bridge or whatever. In transit, you have 70% of it is operations. And so I kind of look at that in a whole different bucket too. It's just very complicated to do this, but these are, I think, things to think about. And I understand where everybody's coming from with all of this. I just wanted to point out the differences there. And if we tried to do what you did on a schedule, it would never, I mean, they even passed things that did that in my first couple years, saying that they were going to do that. And it, by year 2, it couldn't work, even though they stepped it up, it didn't work anymore because there was no budget to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wanso.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Director Wong, I mean, good for you and whoever in your team is making sure that there's no missed loose ends in your calculations. I mean, that's very forward thinking. I'm stunned that it wasn't happening. I'm glad that it seems like now you're planning for the worst and hoping for the best, which is how you should operate. My biggest hang up to Mayor Ross's point is, this is called the plan needs, but this sounds like planned once, and that's, I guess, a lot of my hurdle. So, but thank you for bringing this forward. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Owen, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Wong, just alluding to what Mayor Ross and the councilmen were alluding to earlier on the accepting versus approving reports, can you clarify, because in County Commission we accept reports as well. Can you clarify, I guess, for our purposes, why we're doing it in this fashion rather than accepting?
I can only clarify based on my experience with the agency. 8 years ago when I came here, it was just the standard practice to recommend approval of all of our documents because we had assumed that, that type of language would strengthen the action that you all take. If it's the temperature of this board, I'm happy to recommend either an approval or an acceptance of the report, and we can kind of play it by ear if you would like. If there are documents, reports, plans, studies that we present to you, and you feel that it's worthy of an approval, you can make that motion and vote it forward. If you have some hang-ups or reservations about any of the work that we've done, maybe you accept it. And so if you all would like, we can present 2 options to you moving forward.
Well, and I don't want to do something that hand ties TPO, that puts us in a bad position. But for me, and listen to the temperature of the board here today, I would feel more comfortable moving to accept, and I was going to make that motion, but I guess I want to know, are there negative consequences to that?
No, there are no ramifications to you all making a motion to accept or approve. Truth be told, once this board approves a study, some of the work oftentimes is yet to be done, and the conversations that happen here, even if it culminates in an approval of a study, we may go back after the fact and say, hey, someone mentioned this, I think we can correct it to make it perfect before we upload it to the website and truly consider it final.
Okay, thank you. And so I'll move to accept the report. Or I'll go ahead and make a motion and then move to accept the report.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Cohen?
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think the way I interpreted it is that you're approving the agenda item, which is essentially acceptance of the report. And maybe that could just be clarified in our future agendas. I mean, I think that for something to actually be the position of this board, it needs to be more than just us accepting a report. It needs to be a decision that we make related to one of our priority lists or one of our formal things that we vote on. But maybe if it could just be clarified that you're just accepting the agenda item and you're approving the agenda item, which is just acceptance of the report. I think that's in line with what all the other boards actually do, and that is why the words got a little interchanged, I think.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hurtak.
Thank you. I think that we haven't heard from the person who's probably makes those decisions, so I'm going to ask our attorney for his clarification, because you seem like you would know what the difference between those two are, and does it really matter?
Well, between accepting or approving, I mean, so that the items themselves, just like the items that you'll see in front of your respective boards, has recommended action. The recommended action on the two items are approve, and they don't have the word report. And for instance, the first is approve the 2050 real choices when not driving needs assessment. There's no harm in just changing it to accept. You're not taking some definitive action. You're simply receiving this information, and it's going to be incorporated into ultimately choices the board makes going forward into the two primary documents that is the whole function of MPOs, the LRTP and the TIP. But you could certainly, in terms of the maker of the motion, can say accept instead of approve. There's no harm either way. It doesn't, I don't think, commit this board to anything going forward.
Okay, yes, Mayor Kilden.
So I think the nuance of accept or however we're going to do it would probably be meaningful to some agencies that would be using the document, but I don't know that the public is going to pay any attention to that necessarily. So I think regardless of what position we take on that, it might make sense to add some language to these documents stating that they are estimates. You know, that they're built on long-range plan, they're subject to material change, this is not necessarily what's going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. So it's clear to the users of the documents exactly what they're looking at to avoid any confusion from the public especially.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did I recognize you, Commissioner Owen? I know you want to speak.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I think I've caused more confusion than by trying to simplify it and move to accept. But, you know, again, I'm just moving to accept based on a lot of the comments, but I can easily be convinced not to if.
Okay. Commissioner Kemp?
Yes, it's probably been too long, but I would just say that at the county commission, when we accept, it's usually approved. That's what it means in fact. And I don't think we would accept it if there was something very objectionable in it. So I don't think it matters. I think we could just move with approve and anything in here before it gets done, anything we suggest, for instance, just pick anything, the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, we would have a bunch of discussions or something at the, county commission. There'd have to be the funding there, whatever. I mean, it's kind of just everything out there, and each of the jurisdictions that pay for it have to be the ones that vet it in the end and do it.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the report. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Any opposers? Oh. You oppose? We have one opposed, Gal. Okay. A motion is carried. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move right into the Executive Director's report. And thank you, Connor and Pedro.
All right, thank you, board members. So first, I would like to begin by recapping some actions that occurred at the December 1st TMA and SCTPA. I'm happy to report that the Alliance unanimously approved transmittal of the merger feasibility report with no changes. TPO staff are right now drafting a cover letter, and we plan to send that report via certified mail by the end of next week, which will allow us to comply with the law. While we wait to finalize that cover letter, I've met with some members of our legislative delegation to communicate the need for funding and also to inform them of the transmittal of the report so that they're not caught off guard. The Alliance also voted unanimously to add the Hart Heavy Maintenance Facility and the Florida Tampa BRT project to its regional priority list. And then finally, the three MPOs were asked to present a handful of regional board apportionment options to the TMA in mid-February, which means that this board will first need to explore those options, and we'll schedule that presentation and tee it up to discuss at our February 6th special meeting. Moving next to discretionary grants, we have learned of a number of grants made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. One that we're targeting very closely is the Railway Highway Crossings Program. This grant program provides funding to eliminate safety hazards at grade crossings in light of some of the high-profile incidents that have happened recently countywide. We're looking to partner with your staff to submit some applications this year. This grant actually has a fairly high success rate relative to many of the others, So this seems like a really good opportunity for us to deliver some funds back to this community. Similarly, we're continuing to work with county staff to develop a project and submit an ATTAIN grant, which would be used to implement some operational treatments on Lithia Pinecrest and offer folks in that part of the county some congestion relief. We'll be working through the spring and summer on that effort, and we're targeting fall to submit that application. And of course, we'll bring it to this board for approval and a letter of recommendation. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Coyne?
So on the apportionment discussion that you said we were going to have at our meeting on February 6th, I would like to request, if possible, that you distribute to us the various different apportionment scenarios that you're going to bring up for discussion prior to the meeting, because I think it's going to take a little bit of thought and a little arithmetic to know what we're looking at when I think if we get it the morning of the discussion, it's going to be hard for us to have a meaningful discussion if we hadn't had a chance to digest it first. Because I do think this is probably the most important piece of this conversation with the other counties.
That's absolutely no problem, Commissioner. As I stated at the TMA and SCTPA, staff have already been working to sketch out some different apportionment scenarios. We've got a long list, maybe 20, maybe even more than that. My goal for the February 6th meeting, and again, I can transmit those options to you well in advance of the discussion, will be to figure out which options are totally off the table right from the beginning, and then maybe 5 to 10 options that we can live with, and then we'll bring back our most favored 5 scenarios to the TMA. This won't be a meeting, that February TMA meeting won't be the time in which they decide on an ideal scenario. That will, again, be just to kick around some ideas that seem to have some merit.
I just think that when we send our representatives to that meeting, we should have already, as a group, definitely determined which scenarios we are in favor of and not be, wishy-washy in not being aggressive about, stating our preferences.
Thank you. Councilman. Okay. Mayor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to Commissioner Cohen's point, at that meeting, I want to thank you for giving your representatives the authority to speak on behalf of Hillsborough to say that the apportionment discussion needs to occur sooner than later, because the TMA, there was at least some of them who said, well, in 2024, we're going to primarily be, on a listening tour, and then we'll start these discussions in earnest in 2025. And because we were able to say, well, Hillsborough would really like to start these before 2025. We think that a lot of this expenditure and effort is going to be needless if we can't come to some agreement on apportionment first. And so that, because of our stating that idea gained traction at the TMA and the Suncoast Alliance, and so that's the reason that this discussion is happening now instead of a year from now. So thank you for that.
And to your point, I think that if it gets to the point where this is going to be presented to the public, that's going to, if I were someone who was seeing this for the first time, that would be my first question, would be how many votes is Hillsborough going to have, and how's this thing going to be structured? I would want to know that before I even was able to entertain whether I was in favor of it or against it or whatever. So I think that's good.
Exactly. There is a rather thorny topic that we need to discuss, probably, Johnny, in January or soon. And that is the issue of the non-elected people that we here consider, at least some of us. We don't think we have, we're not unanimous on this, and I know that. But we need to figure out what our position is on the things that we consider regional, the airport, the port, and what are we going to do with the transit? Those issues, because there are differences of opinion in this room, but we have to figure out what our position is so we can go there.
Is it your sense that the the Pinellas and Pasco representatives on the TMA viewed the agency heads as Hillsborough people, or that that there was a trepidation related to that?
I don't know that we had enough discussion to really get a sense. I think that primarily their concern will not be should the airport or port be voting members. I think their concern is going to be what impact does that have on our representation on the board. I think that's going to be the bigger. I don't think it's going to be, do we care if the port or airport are voting? I think it's going to, well, wait a minute, is that going to take away from our, I think that's the bigger.
Yeah, that was I think the question I was trying to ask, so, yeah.
Commissioner Kemp?
And as long as this is a discussion point right now, so it is fairly well established that there's 12 representatives from Hillsborough County according to population per capita, and 13 between the other two, split by population. I can't remember exactly how that goes, but to me, if we are going to have non-electeds that the region wants, then those should be off the top and not count against our proportional share of electeds. So that, if, for instance, if there were 2 non-electeds that the region wanted, it would be down to 23 and then proportionally split among electeds in the region. Also, there's been a suggestion that you could make non-voting members of those regional, and I don't know if they were non-voting members still. I don't know if they, how that would affect the 25 limit, or if that's still in place that way. But that's one of the considerations. And then we did have a commissioner, or maybe even 2, saying that if they did consider that these were Hillsborough representatives and that they should also have, to the point, one commissioner in Pasco couldn't, he just said a business person, then he started saying that we needed to have representation from the Rays and the Bucks and the Lightning. So, I mean, well, that seriously was, what was mentioned. He said business representation, and then he started, naming, to the point that, I don't know, it's just something to think about, because there was a thought about parity. There was some discussion about parity on that with Pinellas as well. They also, believe it or not, I mean, they do have an airport, but they also have a port, as I understand. So some kind of authority of some sort like that. But I'm not saying anybody's saying that, but, some kind of, if we didn't do it that way, I think it would be a problem. So I'm just
Thank you. We'll hear from our legal counsel.
And Madam Chair, just to add a point of clarification there for members who don't go to TMA, the 12 Hillsborough and 13 non-Hillsborough members is rooted in the state statute caps MPO boards at 25 members total, so proportionality would be that number. But I would say, in terms of reference to bringing in other people like sports teams and stuff, there are state and federal requirements as to who can be MPO members, and I cannot conceive of a situation where that would qualify. So there are obviously federal and state guardrails as far as who could be on the board.
Thank you for the clarification, and we'll wait to hear more at such time. We'll move right on into old business. Do we have any old business? Any new business? Okay. I want to wish everyone happy holidays. Stay safe, and look forward to working with you in 2024. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate working with you, Mayor.